So let's talk about the elements of resilience. You have 5 of them. This is the exact order, or it doesn't really have an order?
There is no order, no. I use the Mandala imagery to try and make sense of that. And so, yes, there's absolutely no need to start in any place. And the reality is, we've all already started, right? So we all have strengths and we have areas we might want to develop in the 5 elements. And so, yeah, I wouldn't want anyone to think they must start in one place. It's really just about recognizing where you are. And that's one of the reasons why we built a self-assessment to accompany the book and the work, so that people can get a sense of what am I already good at and what do I need to develop. But there's absolutely no need to start in any particular place. I would suggest, start by looking at what you're already good at and recognize that you have some skills here already. Now, how can we use those to help us develop the areas that we want to develop?
Yeah, I like that. I have an order here, so there's no order, but I have an order of discussion. The first one is emotional well-being, self-awareness, mental wellness, and spirituality.
So self-awareness is understanding your emotional state. How are you feeling? An awareness of your emotions and sort of where they are. People get into a lot of trouble because they just don't recognize how they're feeling in any particular moment or what's going on for them. And then mental wellness is, just as it suggests, it's about mental health. I think we are starting to get more comfortable talking about mental health, but I spent a lot of time in the book really understanding what are some of the key areas, the common areas that people get into trouble with in terms of mental health, and really making the point that we all need to be aware of our mental health, recognizing when and how it's not strong, and making sure that we're getting what we need in those moments. And I even suggest, and from my experience, it's true that there's very few of us who don't have to deal at some point in our lives with some elements of mental wellness. I think that most of us will have moments or significant parts of our lives where this is an issue. And when we pretend it isn't, we make it so much worse. And we certainly take away our resilience when we do that. So that's a key piece. And then spirituality is, as I mentioned earlier, spirituality for me, and in the context of resilience, is about understanding your connection to the universe, understanding that you're not alone. And, for anyone who doesn't have that piece, who doesn't understand that they're connected, it tends to really impact on their ability to be resilient, to really just understand, the challenges that are in front of them and be able to feel comforted and supported as they try and deal with things. So again, it's not about religion. It's not about, there's no prescription here. It's just about understanding for you, and it's such a personal thing, for you, what does spirituality mean? For you, what do you believe? What makes sense to you? What can you find in the world in terms of a spiritual foundation that will make sense for you?
Right. Then personal clarity, personal values, personal vision, and planning.
Right. So this piece I knew was key because I had felt the importance of these pieces and personal clarity in general throughout my own journey. So as long as I can remember, I've had a pretty good clarity around what matters to me. That's the personal values. Around what my dreams were, what I really wanted to accomplish in my life. That's my personal vision. And I've been pretty good at having a plan in place. I'm not a natural planner, but I've been pretty good at recognizing the need to have some specific plans in place to be working towards your vision. Otherwise, it's just a dream. And people who sort of live their lives with great ideas, but nothing ever actually happens. So I knew that as I went through the difficulty of a cancer journey with David, and then of carrying on without him, I recognized the importance and the strength that I derived from having that clarity. And what was interesting was that, of course, my vision and my plan for sure had to change. When your husband is diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer at 42, some things are going to change in your life. And they did. but I still knew, what really mattered to me. I knew that the long-term plan hadn't really changed. I still intended, to continue all the things that brought me joy. And so having that clarity allowed me to adjust my plan in a way that didn't feel like I was falling into a hole. It felt like I was just moving things around to make sense of my new reality, with still having a long-term vision for where I was headed.
Yeah. So the next element is supportive relationships. Seek support, support others, and boundaries.
Yes. So this is an interesting one because I found that when I listened to people's stories, when I looked at what other people were finding resilience in, what was mattering, what was really resonating in terms of resilience, I did find that you can't go it alone. And it was true for me always, but I wondered, well, is that my people orientation or is this true for everyone? And what I found is that, in fact, to some degree, this is true for everyone, that we need to be able to find people who can support us when we need support. And some people are not very good at that. Some people are not very good at asking for help, asking for advice, asking for meals to be made at a time when we're sick, or children to be taxied around if we need some time to recoup. Or even just, someone to bounce ideas off of. That is incredibly important in terms of resilience. And we'll all craft or we'll all figure out, what that looks like, and it'll be different for everyone, but that's an important piece. Supporting others is very obvious for some people. Some people do this all the time. In fact, they can do it too much, that they don't even care for themselves as much as they need to because they're so busy caring for other people. But nevertheless, that is a key piece, that by helping others, we feel strength, and we feel like we have utility, and we have, we're extending our love, and we're getting love back. And so that's an important piece. And then boundaries is a tough one for lots of people. And that's a tricky one because that's where you start to recognize, in terms of supportive relationships, which of those relationships are not supporting you. And then what boundaries do we need to put in place in order to create a supportive relationship? And so it might be that you decide this relationship needs to end, that this person needs not to be in my life. And I think we need to give ourselves permission under some circumstances. And I think many of us have seen those circumstances where that person, in fact, needs not to be part of our lives. And then there are lots of situations where something a little less dramatic or a little less, severe is necessary, which is just saying, you know what, there's parts of the relationship with this person. It might be a parent. I often think of family in these situations because, these people are going to be in our lives, whether we're struggling or not. But what boundaries do we need to put in place so that we can take what needs to be there and not have this person interfering with our resilience? And to me, that's the key question, is to what degree is this relationship interfering with my strength, interfering with my resilience? And what can I do to create some boundaries around how I'm going to allow that person to interact with me?
I like that. And that makes me think about the first one that we talked about, the emotional well-being, self-awareness, right? Self-knowledge.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the next one is dynamic thinking, confidence, realism, and learning focus.
So this is an interesting one, and it has a lot of pieces, but basically what we're talking about here is a combination where we have to have the confidence to know that whatever we have dreamed up, whatever our vision is and our plan is in place, we know what we want to do, we have to have the confidence to know that we can do that. Part of that is hope. So there's a section in the book that I love that talks about hope and looks at hope as a choice, right? We can choose to hope for things. And really, we can have the confidence that whatever we have dreamed up, we can figure it out. We can do it. Not very many of us have dreams so big we can't do them. Many of us have dreams that are too small to really make use of all of our talents. So You just mentioned that boundaries link back to self-awareness. Well, and that is really how the model works. The things are very interrelated. And so your confidence, for instance, can easily relate back to seeking support. So where you don't have the skills in place, where you don't feel like you can conquer a piece of that vision, who do you need to pull into your circle? Who do you need to ask for help, for instance? So that's the confidence piece. The realism piece is, in a way, kind of balances out that confidence. So we're not looking to pretend that everything is always rosy and that everything is always great. We want to be realistic, and we want to be able to look at the world around us, to look at our own situation with some realism, with an ability to say, here are the problems that I see. Here are the gaps between where I am and where I'd like to be. And so that realism is just being able to step back and say, what needs to be fixed here? What isn't going as well as it needs to? Which then leads straight into the learning focus, which is about changing habits. It's about taking that gap. It's about taking that realistic way of looking at things and saying, okay, so here's what I need to change in order to get to where I want to be. So that learning focus is all about that. It's about recognizing what needs to happen and figuring out how you're going to do it.
Yeah, I love that you included that realism. It makes a lot of sense, being realistic, right? So we don't fall for grandiose ideas just for the sake of them, right? Of having them.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to me because I think that sometimes, depending, what you're reading or what you're listening to, you'll hear people talking as if, absolutely anything is possible. Well, okay, but
maybe not everything.
If it truly isn't, and you sort of know, right? So then you kind of step back and you think, that might be true for some people, but it's not for me. And my hope is that people will really recognize that although I encourage dreaming big, I absolutely encourage dreaming big, I think then we need to use this sort of balancing act of, I'm hopeful, I'm confident, I have many, many talents and many blessings and I want to use them. And then what's in my way? What is the problem here that I need to solve? And then let's get good at solving problems, because many of us really struggle to make change in our habits and in our, our ways of being, our ways of looking at things, and how and when is that going to get in the way of our ability to really follow our dreams?
Yeah, these are really great, Kellyanne. Really, really great. Just one left. And I want to make a comment about confidence. You mentioned hope. Is that somehow the same as trust? Trust in ourselves?
I think a little bit. Like there's, to me, trust is a little more complicated. I have to think about that a little bit. So yeah, I do. I trust in myself. But I think hope is, again, it's a little bit different because it's not so much about me. It's about thinking in possibilities or being open to possibility, which may not have anything to do with me and my skills or my confidence in myself. It's more just, the opposite of hope is sort of always assuming that things are going to go wrong or that the worst case scenario is likely. And hope is about the decision to not look at the world that way. And in fact, to decide that chances are things will be okay. And if they're not, and maybe this is where the trust piece would come in, is that if they're not, then I imagine I'll be able to see my way through that, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I love that. And the last element is physical health, sleep, nutrition, and exercise.
Yeah, so this piece is interesting to me because I think it's what makes the model a holistic model in my mind. It's one of the pieces that does that. And I think that when you look at resilience and the way it's talked about very often today, this isn't necessarily part of it. But in my experience, people need to look at this piece. And it really is, as much as any of the elements, it's foundational. And you can't work on your vision if you can't manage your health. And anyone who, for instance, doesn't sleep well knows that, right? We need to be able to manage our overall health. And the big pieces, there's lots of pieces, but I think the big pieces are, do you sleep well? And for all three of them, it always comes back to, if there's an issue, then where can you find the help to solve this problem? But I just found that, lots of people were just not dealing with these three things. They were not worrying about or looking at their lack of sleep, lack of exercise, or poor nutrition as just things that were somehow separate from, their dreams and ambitions, separate from their ideas about how they're going to get through their struggles. And in my mind, they're completely linked. But you can't do one without the other.
I agree.